The vast majority of watches and aspects of watch ownership are generally positive and amazing. But that said, not all watches are created equal, and there are some pieces that can be more of a burden to own than others. So in this video, we're going to be looking at 5 types of watches that can suck to own. So for this video, this is going to be my opinion. I'm going to try my best to give logical reasons why some of these watches might be more prone to being victim to this classification than others by giving some of my experiences as a collector, as well as talking to thousands of collectors over the years. And another thing I will mention is not all watches are going to be put in a box. So it could be a bad watch for somebody else, but it could be a great watch for you. So just follow your own protocol and reasoning for why you collect something. So the holidays are finally here, and we have some amazing offers on teddybaldassarre.com for Black Friday and the holiday season. Some of these offers include a free watch tool for select marathon purchases, a complimentary book that comes with your Oris watch purchase, 10% off strap purchases, our gift card bonus program where you'll get a gift card for select money spent, and much more. These special offers are only going on for a limited time, so definitely act fast. And if you want a full list of all the holiday offers, go to our website and check out our Holiday 2023 offer guide. We know you can buy a watch in many different places nowadays for the holidays, but we'd love to have your business because it allows us to keep doing what we're doing and producing content for you all every single day. So now the first watch type that can suck to own. And don't get mad at me. I know there's some people that love this. I am an owner of many of these types of watches, but we have to discuss it. Vintage. So vintage is a loaded animal, and I want to break it down in a few ways. One is vintage watches certainly can be great watches to buy. You can find some great vintage snags out there for reasonable prices. But there are also a lot of downsides in why vintage watches can be a burden to own for many. So first, they're more delicate than modern counterparts. You have to be more careful with them. Typically, we'll have to baby them more. You see people taking off their watch to wash their hands, commonly with vintage watches, because back then water resistance was not a guarantee. I just find there's more reasons to take off a vintage watch before doing something than a modern watch, just given the construction of it, some of the materials, and a variety of different factors. Then you have the whole element of servicing, which can be difficult for a variety of reasons. You have who can actually do it, which is a question for many vintage watches. Is there somebody in close vicinity to you that can do the job, or do you have to send it far away? That's a whole obstacle to navigate. You have parts. Do they still even make them? Are they readily available? How am I going to navigate this? Do I have to create this Franken watch when I go service my watch? What do I have to do here? And this is a reality for many watches where parts are not currently being made anymore. You also have to worry about the timetable. How quickly will I get the watch back? The cost also associated with it because of all these factors. Because not many people can do it, not many people want to do the job, they're gonna charge you for doing that job when you can't ultimately find somebody. And when you're combining this with difficult complications, say a vintage chronograph, maybe a triple calendar, something of the sort, yes, they look beautiful, but it's gonna come with a price to pay given some of these other points that I mentioned: parts, timetable, who can actually do the job. It's more select company that are going to be able to do it. And then finally, you also have a watch that typically is less functional compared to their modern counterparts. Water resistance sometimes is an afterthought. You have to also get these watches tested out. But personally, I am not somebody that would advocate going and diving with a vintage dive watch even if you did test the seals. If you want to do it, that's your thing, you can do it, but still probably not worth the squeeze in my opinion. Then you have quick set dates. If you've ever had a vintage watch that does not have a quick set date, you'll know the pain there and how much longer that can take. Hacking seconds is not always a thing you will see as well. And then shorter power reserve. So combining that with the lack of a quick set date can be more tedious if you haven't worn the watch in a while and you have to set the date many days in advance. Again, vintage watches can absolutely be a joy to own, but there can also be many that can become projects, and the cost for ownership is way more expensive than many people realize. For number 2 on our list, we have non-established brands. So let me preface this by saying I am a huge believer in small businesses. If you're somebody that values having direct communication and connection to a smaller organization, as somebody who owns a small business, I am all for this. I'm a huge advocate of this idea. But when you're dealing with watches, it can create some complications if the right people are not at the helm, and you do run the risk at times when you're dealing with non-established brands. One is going to be customer service. What you'll see with a lot of upstart brands, like a Kickstarter brand, it's all about getting that initial money in the door and just trying to figure out how to have all the resources go to producing the watches, that maintaining the business can sometimes be a casualty to that, where after service care is not even something that comes on the radar until it's too late, and then you're a customer having to really pay the consequences for that, even though the watch at surface value looks really cool. Another thing that I'll mention is warranties. Warranties don't really mean anything, 10-year warranty if the brand has only been around for 6 months. How do you have any track record that that is going to be backed by a brand that is maybe not as well known and not as established in the industry? Now, not to say that you have to be skeptical about everything and that this isn't great that the brand is putting their money where their mouth is, but sometimes you do have to look a little bit further into that and what is really the promise here and can they maintain it? There's also typically less community documentation and support. When you look at a very popular watch, you can go on places like Facebook forums, different watch forums online, Reddit, and you can see that there are other owners that are providing their own ownership story and what they're maybe experiencing, whether it's going through the service process or going through some of the aftermarket type of considerations for different strap options or bracelets and just general points that a owner would worry about. That is available information to you. For smaller brands, there's just not as much of that community aspect, so sometimes you have to navigate this on your own. And then finally, they're a little bit harder to move on from if you do change your mind. If you have a mainstream brand, there typically is a built-in market of people that are looking to get that watch. That is not always the case for a niche upstart brand that is not as well established. So in those cases, you might have to just eat the cost if you ever are going to change your mind and are trying to move on from it. Again, I am a huge believer in just different micro brands and things that you can have some fun with. Watches are about individual expression, so it's not always about thinking with your brain, but just have a good little balance of that. And if you feel something is maybe not adding up or there's not a lot of credibility around something, don't always be the first person to take that risk or just try to get some more information before doing so. Next, we have mechanical complications, and I'm going to pinpoint one because of just how frequent they come up in the industry and how almost every brand has a watch of this complication type, and that's chronographs. Complications, yes, they are sometimes mesmerizing to look at. Sometimes they are useful, and there's a lot of great things that come along with them, but there are sometimes also hidden costs and different hurdles that come with owning those watches. When you look at a luxury sports car, if you just see it for the sticker price at times, that's not telling you the full story. There's a lot of other additional costs that come with owning that automobile. Same thing could be said for certain watches, and even a basic level Valjoux chronograph, which is as straightforward as you're gonna find. You're gonna find servicing costs many times going and exceeding $500. And for some people, that is going to surprise them. And if you are caught with a watch outside of warranty, that really does suck because in some cases you may have gotten that watch for around $2,000 and then a good chunk of that is going directly into that watch servicing. I think people just underestimate the cost of some of these things, and chronographs are complicated. If you ask many luxury watchmakers what is the most difficult watch to service, one of the ones that they'll commonly say that is overlooked is a chronograph. They are way more complex than what we realize just because we see them so often. They're ubiquitous in watchmaking and they become a watch type all themselves. This is even furthered as you start to get into luxury complications, well over $1,000 for a full overhaul of the movement. I don't want to scare people away from buying a chronograph or a perpetual calendar, anything of the sort, but just know this cost that's associated with it. Maybe look up some servicing costs. And when you're buying pre-owned, especially outside of a warranty window, just have this in the back of your mind. For the next watch type, number 4, we have the watch where the servicing costs more than the entire watch itself. Now, I get tagged in posts all the time about like different crazy complication watches, like a Chinese tourbillon for like $1,000, which from afar, it looks like legit. It looks like it is a tourbillon, everything checks out. But then you start thinking about it with your brain and you realize, wait, why would I want to own that? Even if it costs for ownership initially seems fine, you don't start to factor in all of these other elements that can be an issue. A tourbillon, when you get that service, for one, it's going to be exceeding the price of what typically you'll see with some of these more attainable tourbillons, which is remarkable. Let's give them a round of applause for figuring out how to do it for this price. It's pretty crazy. But then when something goes wrong, which most likely and inevitably will, you will have this issue of where can I send it? Will they actually help me out? And what will the cost be? Any brand selling a tourbillon for $1,000 to $2,000, for example, is going to have a tough time making that worthwhile for their customer and honoring any warranty, because the cost to service it is going to be almost like producing a whole watch in itself. And that's if you get a response from some of these brands, going back to the further point about thinking about upstart brands and what is actually coming with this brand. Are they going to be true to what they're backing in the product that they offer? You're also seeing a lot of brands using Seagull chronograph movements, and I think it's a cool looking movement. It is a movement that has some interesting history to go along with it, but it does cost quite a bit of money to service that. It is a column wheel chronograph movement, and you're finding it in watches sometimes even under $500. That's ridiculous, and it's amazing to see when you first get it, but then there is the cost of servicing it down the road. It might even be better off just replacing the movement itself. There's some great brands that are using these Seagull movements, and this is just something that needs to be factored into the conversation. If it's going from a brand that maybe is less established and they're not as straightforward about their servicing costs, this can really suck to own, because then you're looking at a watch that's acting like toilet paper. You can only use it once, and then what do? I have to throw it away. And I don't think that's what watchmaking should be about. So that is something that can be a little bit difficult. You also have the ultra affordable crowd, where you'll see like these different watches that somehow are assembled very cheap. QC sometimes is not always there, and you can find like a mechanical watch for like $100. But if something goes wrong, and if the QC isn't to a standard and something breaks, then you're gonna have to worry about maybe getting it serviced. And if the cost for service starts to add up, then the money you could have spent on something that maybe was twice as much could have been very much in play with the QC being stronger. Like for myself, for example, like if you can find a Seiko at a pretty fair price, there's a lot of cool Seiko 5s out there versus something that's gonna be overseas with no quality control. Sometimes it's better to go for the more expensive watch if it means better quality control versus something that you're not as certain about when it comes to the quality standard, and it could lead to more work down the road. For me, peace of mind and enjoyment is a top priority for the watches I decide to own, but it does depend on where you stack. If you're somebody who likes modding and doing these type of things, not as much of an issue. But for myself, I don't want to have to add extra projects for watches, especially when you're starting to get up there in price. And now for the final watch that sucks to own, we have the watch that you're afraid to wear. This can occur in a variety of different ways and for a variety of different reasons. But one thing I'll say right at the upfront here is if a watch is causing you any stress, if a watch is creating any burden and you can't enjoy wearing it, you should not own it. Simple as that. Now, starting with one way I think I've seen this happen is the watch is so rare and cannot be replaced. This can be a vintage watch. This could be a watch that was on a long wait list to acquire, and it just becomes this burden on your life where you're so worried about what's gonna go wrong, is something gonna happen, am I gonna scratch it? It doesn't really matter what the concern is, but if that is the concern, you're gonna be less likely to wear it, and that's gonna get in the way of your enjoyment. And I think this is a watch that ultimately sucks because you're almost a slave to the watch itself rather than you're able to enjoy it. In a very similar light, you have the watch that is seen as an investment where each scratch will just scare you. You're just looking for door handles wherever you go. You're just cowering in fear with this watch on your wrist. It's just, I mean, come on guys, you know my stance on this. That's not why I collect watches. I get there are people out there like that, but quite frankly, you have a paper weight. You do not have a watch. It's just collecting dust in a safety deposit box. That is not a watch, that is a paperweight. Or I don't even know what you want to call it, but that's how I would classify that. So that's another watch that sucks to own in my opinion. Now, I don't want to incite fear in people, but you have this also being a reason why people are afraid to wear it. It could be a target if it was seen on your wrist. If you're wearing an all gold day date and you're finding yourself in situations, you live in a certain area where you might be targeted, robberies and muggings happen and you do have to be careful. Again, I do not want to create a world of panic for people, but if that is going to cause you stress, it's a watch that sucks to own. And then for the final way for this last point where I see this happening is where the watch becomes too much of your world. In other words, you buy too much watch in relation to your net worth. It's too big of a percentage in comparison. You've heard about maybe the saying when you buy too much house, or people that are house poor. The same thing can be said for a watch. You can be house poor, you could be watch poor. Buy too much watch, it gets in the way of your enjoyment. buy too much house, it gets in the way of the family's enjoyment. You can't buy groceries, that's not a home. That is a nightmare waiting to happen. The same thing can happen to your watch. How I always say this is, if you can set the thing on fire in your driveway, get the neighbors all around you, and you can all watch it burn and flame, you might shed a tear because it is sad and it would make you mad. I mean, I would be mad if I burned any of my watches, but that would not change my world. My world would not change if any of those were destroyed. So keep this in mind. If you are stressed to wear the thing and you feel guilt when you wear it, that watch sucks to own. And actually, you don't own that watch, it owns you. But all right, guys, that is my take here today, looking at some watches that suck to own. Do you agree with my takes? Do you not agree with my takes? Also leave a comment down below if, beyond just maybe agreeing or disagreeing with me, if you have another watch that you think also should be included on a list like this, or if you have some personal ownership stories for people out there. Also, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. It does help out the channel as well. Definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, how we're able to fund all of our productions here is through selling watches on our site. So if you're in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business. We know you can buy a watch essentially anywhere nowadays, but we'd love to have it, and it allows us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But all right, guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.